Hello and good afternoon. Well, from wherever you are, thank you so much for joining and welcome to this session on whether the philanthropic world is ready for new ways of giving in partnership with Wilder Foundation. My name is Shafi Musaddiq and I'm the news editor for Alliance magazine. Before we delve into the discussion on whether philanthropy is ready for new ways of funding, just going to run through a few housekeeping rules for you all. And there are two ways that you can get involved if you're watching. Firstly, feel free to introduce yourself using the chat function on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. You should be able to see a little speech bubble. You can also use this chat if you're if you're having any issues with your audio or video. Our team behind the scenes are ready to help you if you need it. You can also put questions to our panelists at any time using the Slido Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen. And as well as asking your own, you'll also be able to upvote other questions if you'd like to see other questions asked. We'll be keeping an eye out on this throughout the webinar and selecting questions to be put to our panelists. Should you wish to do so, on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you will see a CC button. This allows for closed captioning in English and several other languages as well. We encourage you to use this if you need it. For those of you who are not subscribed to Alliance, please use the code EVENT24 and you'll get a 20% discount for a full year subscription. For more information, click on the link in the chat. Right, to start our conversation. Firstly, I will introduce Noor Nusebia. Noor is a community activist with over 14 years of experience within marketing, communications, and leadership, as well as program management. She's also worked in both the private sectors and NGOs. Noor, thank you so much for joining us. And I know the question of new funding is particularly strong for you right now. You are deeply connected to the role of improving Palestinian rights and freedoms, particularly through your work in the Dahlia Foundation. Is now the moment to discuss new ways of funding, particularly in relation to meeting both the short-term and long-term needs of the Palestinian people? In other words, what does new funding mean for you? And has there been a failure of philanthropy, in your opinion, in not being agile enough to find those new ways of funding?
Good evening, or maybe good morning for some of our attendees. First of all, thank you, Shafi, for this amazing introduction. And definitely thank you for Alliance Magazine for organizing this session. I know how much it took and effort it took from you all to make it a real success. And hopefully we all can enjoy and discuss further about our philanthropy and the role of philanthropy in nowadays. Your question is too big, so I'll try to make it smaller. I will start by saying that in Palestine, especially, the situation and the difficulties have not been ever since easy, and the challenges have continued, but nowadays it's escalating day after the other. Especially after the genocide in Gaza starting October and the confiscations that's happening in the West Bank, there is a huge number of challenges in terms of limitation of movement, political, social challenges, and this is all affecting the community development efforts that we're doing on ground, definitely. So, and as well, it's shifting the power more toward the people who owns the power today, towards the people who control it today, who are more of getting in charge. And this is more even getting people on ground more paralyzed to do what they believe they need and what's their priorities. If I would start by talking about historical presence of the philanthropy in the Palestinian community, maybe it was not historically named philanthropy, but it has got other alternatives names like solidarity, support, giving. And it's all have been done for voluntary work, for the willingness of giving. And there's a very common saying that we have is that there's no one who's poor and we all got something to give. And this was the basic of why Dahlia is there, because we believe it's the importance of owning the resources that we have and the way we can give. So we have people who can give financial support, other can give materialistic, and other can give mental health. Even a smile is a support, it's a resource that we can give and we can always share with others. And this has been the main pillar of building a cohesion within our community. But unfortunately, this had not lasted long. And especially after Oslo and the new liberal economical situation, the Palestinian community got more integrated with the global economy. And this had led people more toward being in a full day or a full salary paid job that is rather to afford their personal needs, not the community needs. And people got more away from landing, farming, and manufacturing. And actually, they lost the vision of working toward building a durable community. And this is what Dahlia is trying to build now, working with the communities on ground, with the support of different partners, one of which is the global community for giving change. And this is what we're doing on ground. If we want to talk more about the aid and the funding in Palestine, actually it's been, it's especially after Oslo, it's been flooding in the Palestinian community, and the power of money is more of taking place. And this had led actually to the conditional funding and the unflexible funding, and having the power of the funder to control and put his own agenda. And this actually harmed the Palestinian community much, much more than giving it the benefit. And the harm have been varied a lot. It made it a very big inflation in the economical pricing in the community. It is about the power control that the donor is putting actually on ground. It's setting the priority for the donor agenda, not for the community need, which is actually against all the other community development approaches that we're trying to put in place. This has actually led to more losing the voice of the community, having to know what's the needs and the priorities of the community itself. And the major crisis got to be that we as an indigenous people have forgot even that there is a wealth of resources that we have the right to control and utilize for the best of our community. This is the opposite maybe of the philanthropy, but we still believe, and this is why Dahlia Association was founded, is that there is always an alternative way to do things. There is a way to build a vibrant, independent, accountable civil society. And this is our dream, is actually to get out of all the unflexible conditional funding. And this is why we do advocate for the power and the value of the resources and the power of the value of our community as a replacement of the injected controlled fund that we are receiving. If I would refer point to your question, Shafi, again, if you excuse me, about stepping up or the failure, I would say even that it stepped up. It didn't fail. The solidarity and the support and the situation that is going now, especially after the 7th of October, had showed a lot to us about how the philanthropy is stepping up, not down. But what we need is that maybe it's not reflected in media. I do agree with you. Maybe it's not in a very systematic, structured situation, but all what happened was not structured. All what happened was unexpected. So, but to tell you the truth, and there's some very healthy news that we can see about how people are really willing to support. So there is always a way to change. Actually, it's stepping up, maybe not shown or reflected enough in the media or promoted enough, but there is a huge amount of resources that people are willing to give to Palestine and to support the Palestinian despite the challenges. And it goes in different levels. It's some of which is a humanitarian aid. Others are willing to support female movements. Others are willing to support the grassroots initiatives. So there is different resources that we all value. And this had shown how much people believe that they need to give for the aim of giving, not for the aim of any other benefits. It's just for solidarity support. And Dali have noticed this since the beginning, and it was one of the alternatives way of funding that we activated a community fund formulation. So we activated a Gaza Community Fund, and we have reached out to all our partners, individuals, people who supported Dalia maybe 10 years ago, and they all have shown support. And this support was in different ways. Some who have supported financially, others who have sent even a letter of support is a way of giving you this breath to continue in an unconditional situation that we're all living now. So, and this was a really very success story. And we believe it is a way that you give them solidarity support within the community funds, and the community is the right side to decide. They know much better. They have the knowledge of what they need, what's their priority, and how they want to do things, why they want to do things. It's much more of the power of the conditional funding who provides all these rules or the system or the structure. But at the end, philanthropy is about letting people enjoy what they want and what they need. It's not what the donor need, or it's not what the Dahlia Association need. It's even us for Dahlia, we don't interfere what they want to do. And this was one of the big challenges that we faced with the program, is that when we go to the community and to ask them what you want, they got surprised because they're not used to it. And this is one of the big issues of having this conditional funding, that the power is not moving to the community, but actually the community are the real power. It's the human resource, it's the land resource, it's the ownership. They own it, they do it much better than anyone else. So it's about taking the roles. Other alternative ways of doing, there's always alternative ways of doing. Now where Dahlia Association is part of a collective committee that is working on ground to mobilize resources, and these resources will go to the other organizations, sister company partners who got affected from rejecting any conditional or returning money to any conditional funding. This is the way we show support to them. Maybe we don't help them to continue as they were planned to be, because we don't have this big amount of resources. But the idea is you support people to continue, to give them this small boost, and then they can continue and prevent them actually from shutting down or closing their organization. So there is always a way, and we believe we're trying to do this way, but it's about having this advocacy for the theme of giving for nothing. It is the basic, it is the mandate of philanthropy. It's being flexible, it's giving the people the power to do what they want to do. Definitely there are challenges, barriers that avoid all this in the Palestinian context. There is several actually barriers, and it's related to economic situation, the structure, the governmental structure, but there's always a way to do things. And we believe even if there's all these barriers, we can still find a way. We can find a second way and the third way and the fourth way, but it's all about thinking how we want to do things and keep the power for the people who should own the power. It's the community, it's the people on ground. They should own the power, and we all should support that the power stays there. And I remember in one of the sessions that we attended with Giving for Change program last year in Bogota was, is it shift the power or power the shift that should take place? And this was a very nice discussion actually that took place. That's actually, yes, we need to shift the power, but also we need to give the power to all the shift to go toward the community. So is it a recycling way of using the same sentence? I know it took long, maybe I even exceeded.
No, that's fantastic, Noor. And I
the
think
last comment that I would add, Shafi, actually is to have this philanthropy model really very successful, there is two main pillars that needs to be there: trust and the right networking. These are the real backbone. And this is what we really saw now and what's happening after the 7th of October. Most of the organizations have lost a part of their programs and they shut down, they reduced the salaries, they reduced the working hours for the people. But what we believe is the right model is having the trust and the right network. And this had led Dalia to continue smoothly and even get more support from the partners, from the individuals, from the friends, just to continue that we all believe that philanthropy efforts will lead to the durable development and the right development.
I feel I could see all the other panelists nodding and smiling because I think the theme of for all of you is about shifting the power and about agency and trust. And this leads me nicely onto our second panelist, Yara. Yara Tlas is the executive director and head of programming at My Homeland, which is a grassroots initiative supporting displaced children and local communities in need through the arts and humanities of creative education and community-based projects. Iara, you took part in a program that is supported by Vil Janssen with a new grant making model, which was working with displaced Syrian refugees in Turkey. I know that you're of the belief that the philanthropic world must grapple with a whole new culture of transparency and consultation as part of kind of a wider changing relationship between local actors and funders. How does that look like, particularly in the context of your work with displaced Syrians?
Yes. Thank you so much, Shafi, for the introduction. Really happy to be here. It's a great opportunity. I would love to talk about our experience with Wilde Ganzen. Actually, it was a very interesting program that we took part in Turkey with displaced refugee children. And the approach, it actually introduced us to a new model. It was our first time working with a participatory grant making approach. So it was also a learning experience for us as well as for the communities that we were working with. And it was really interesting because the whole approach, like Noor was saying, it was very much a more egalitarian approach. It really shifted the power to the community. The program itself was designed in a way that enabled the community to actually design the program, to implement it, to through a series of community-based consultations, actually, where different community groups, all of them displaced and all of them refugees as a result of the war, they would meet and discuss and share ideas and brainstorm and talk about their challenges and the issues that are very pressing for them, and then come up with solutions that they feel are more culturally appropriate to their context and their community. And this was really interesting for us because it shifted the power. It really created a sense of ownership where they felt like they were actually agents of change, as opposed to usually having someone come from the top and telling them what to do and how to go about their own problems. So it was a very interesting, empowering experience that provided the community with a sense of ownership, a sense of agency. And what we noticed is that when we give local actors agency over the decision-making process for them to solve their problems and challenges, we noticed an increased sense of involvement and community engagement because they were very much mobilized themselves. They were the ones, directly impacted by these funds. So they also wanted to make sure that they prove also to the funders that this was done in a way that's transparent, that's successful, that's efficient. So they were really directly involved in making sure that this was done in a way that's successful, that ensures the longevity of the project. So there was a sense of accountability that was very natural to the process. But also, I would say what's interesting is that Wilde Ganzen also, the funders also were very open, and they provided us with that transparent approach for us to be able to work freely with our community. So I truly believe that the funders also, they need to have an open approach. They need to trust that the communities will be able to lead, will be able to implement these projects successfully, and that in turn, that sense of trust and um, um, creates, really strengthens the relationship and paves the way for more dialogues and for more productive, meaningful conversation that can also develop the local actors' capacity building in return. So it's sort of a two-way street where we are also really learning and making a use of some of these structures and guidelines, for example, with Wilde Ganzen, was a very open and beautifully structured approach in the sense that there was regular check-ins, a very open communication process. We would meet and discuss challenges and progress on a weekly, monthly basis. And that also provided us with resources, with a way to, understand how we can actually implement a successful project. So very much giving the power and giving the decision-making process to the community for them to solve their issues, and to make sure that also the funds are being directed to the most relevant initiatives on the ground and the most pressing challenges, but also, with sort of a guideline in the background to lead the process in terms of reporting. How do we document this? How does the community also want to document their own process? So all of that was really interesting for us, and overall it was a really incredible experience. And I think also another thing that I would mention is important is to really understand the context. I know each country and each community is different. In our case, for example, working with refugee communities, these are communities that have been through multiple crises, often at the same time, from war to displacement to rebuilding their lives in Turkey, as all of them were displaced, and then facing economic challenges, and then natural disaster with the earthquake in Turkey, and rebuilding their lives again. So all of these challenges are very specific to this specific context, and they need to be acknowledged and taken into consideration when dealing and operating with a grassroots community project. But I am definitely of the view that these are that we need more of these new models, and we need more of these structures to shift the power to the community, and to really trust that they will be able to create what's best for them and implement positive change and really improve their community at large.
Thank you, Yara. That will definitely come back. I'm going to come back to each of you and unpick a lot of what you've said, because there are common threads here, a lot about agency, and kind of disrupting this top-down model that many of us have been exposed to. The next panelist I know also wants to talk about this. Rehan Bashir, welcome. Rehan is originally from Yemen. She works as a program manager for Wilde Ganzen, focusing on the Giving for Change program. And she's also part of the design process of a participatory grant-making approach implemented in Turkey, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Egypt. Rehan, both Noor and Yara have spoken about ultimately shifting the power, and that's a phrase that's becoming well used within progressive philanthropy. Is it time that we dismantle the top-down approach across the board, or how is Wilde Ganzen applying any of this theory in practice?
Yes, Shafiq, thank you so much. Well, let me say first, thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you for Noor and Yara as well for joining, and as well as Karine. I think, yes, absolutely, it's time to embrace this transformation. In fact, I think we're a little bit overdue. And I think that for genuine, impactful change, you must take that leap of faith, and with complete or wholeheartedly trust in lived experiences and contextual knowledge of communities and local actors. That's where we believe that expertise are unparalleled, and it's crucial that we recognize and honor this in that journey. I think it's about time to take a step back and, like Yara was saying, shift the power completely in all decision-making processes to those who truly understand and know best. Like Noor was saying, exactly to where the power actually belongs, and it's time to take a passenger seat rather than a driver's seat in this whole aspect. And I think providing necessary resources and support that could support local leadership is quite highly required at the time being. And if we're truly committed to bringing about systematic change, actual genuine change, we need to move beyond the regular charity mindset and start addressing the roots of the issues, rather than trying to handle only this the symptoms of the issues themselves, which also means that we need to adopt a justice lens, recognizing and confronting systematic inequalities. And for that, very specifically, I would say yes, it's about time to dismantle top-down approaches and reimagine and innovative funding approaches and models that could actually accommodate these changes and effectively address the challenges ahead. And I think it's the moment to make a meaningful difference by standing beside those who are at the heart of the solutions. They know best, they can do better. And especially if we would like to create a future that is defined by equity, sustainability, and collaboration. Now, to the second part of your question, and how does this actually look like for Wilde Ganzen? I would say this has been the minaret and the core of all of our work so far. We give ultimate value to the relationships that we have with all of our partners and try to continuously nourish these relationships, like Noor was saying, with trust, collaboration, transparency, and mutual accountability. Together with our partners, we continuously try to explore new innovative funding mechanisms, approaches that are mainly community-centered, which also is described in our funding models at the time being, which all originate at the community level, in which our partners, alongside the communities that they aim to serve, are the ones identifying the issues. They also identify the solutions and all of the other frameworks around measuring what actually matters the most to them, learning from what goes well and what doesn't, and maintaining accountability at all levels. I could also say that our funding models vary from small grants to most of which are flexible, to bigger grants that are multi-year programs that are focusing specifically in increasing local ownership, community participation, sustainability, and on investing in capacity and skill sharing. We work and we take pride in saying that we work closely with our partners. We learn a lot from them and with them as well, about overcoming setbacks and challenges as they arise. Probably you've heard about it. There's a program that Noor was talking about, which is the recent pilot. Yara was talking about the recent pilot for participatory grant making, which is completely built in a contextualized manner with all of our local actors in a funding model that starts at the community level with community consultations, and it builds up into the level of design, giving the power of decision of selecting the actual proper solution by the community themselves and for the community members to hold those local actors accountable as well. It's completely managed with the program. We also take pride in our program of Change the Game Academy, which focuses on specifically what Yara was talking about, strengthening capacities of social change makers to effectively raise resources locally and mobilize other forms of domestic support. So that could be cash and that could be also in kind. And it's a joint initiative of 17 other organizations, local actors, all of which they came together now to form what we call the Change the Game Academy Alliance. Another one is Giving for Change program, which is focusing on recognition and importance of domestic resources to increase local ownership, unlocking people's agency, and strengthening communities' abilities to claim their entitlements in general. And then we also have our MAT funding program, which depends on local capacities and expertise to locally fundraise for issues that are identified at the community level. And then Wilde Ganzen would like to, what we do is just we top up and we match the funds that they have locally fundraised. And I think that's just to sum up that this is where we stand in this whole process of dismantling top-down approaches. It's not all red and roses. There's a lot of sweat and blood, lots of challenges, just like we were saying. We need to also learn a lot in that process, internally and externally, in regards to processes, systems that needed to change, and mindset shifts as well to what it was and what it is now, moving from that specific approach and trying to avoid as much, not to shadow a similar approach. So completely demolishing it and building something that is actually coming bottom up from where it actually belongs. Yeah.
You make it sound incredibly easy, Roham. Before I move on to Shireen, I do want to actually ask you very briefly, what are those challenges, if you could explicitly tell us?
Indeed. Well, there's a lot, a lot of them, but probably to tap on some specific ones. We needed to do a lot of unlearning of what we knew already about systematic processes, procedures, trusting local actors in overcoming specific challenges, that the capacities are there. And we're talking about mainly also mind shifting, the whole mindset and the concept of the boxes that needs to be checked, and accepting that different forms of monitoring evaluation, for example, can be done in a more participatory way, where indicators can be easily identified from how the communities actually identify success factors and how they would like to track it and change it. And also ensuring that we are activating feedback loops. That is something that we're still working on, we're still learning, also with our partners, but also then internally, or the buy-in for the change mindset of doing something differently, the policies, you name it, and the manuals that you have to adapt and readapt, probably sometime even completely change to adapt the new process that you're trying to implement. And the timelines in between all of that, of learning, unlearning, trying, and then failing forward to succeed, if I may say.
Thank you so much, Raham. I had to push you a little bit.
No, you got you, Shafi.
Final speaker, welcome Shireen Faraj of USAID. Shireen serves as the Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Bureau for Planning, Learning and Resource Management, where she oversees strategy and program planning. And Shireen also coordinates the Bureau's work on diversity, equity and inclusion, as well as accessibility and localization. Shireen has previously worked in anti-trafficking programs in the Middle East and South Asia at the US Department of State. Shireen, what does it look like when funders share knowledge rather than seek to own it?
Thank you, Shafi, for the question and for inviting USAID to join this important discussion today. It really is such a pleasure to be with you all and to be part of this panel. I am so humbled to be amongst such company. And it's been wonderful listening to you all talk about this issue from your perspective, and so much of what you said resonates, and I'm happy to join and add into the conversation. Now, the question that you're asking, it's an important one, but what does it actually look like in practice? I mean, we can all agree that it's critical that funders share both knowledge with each other, as well as with the communities that we're working to empower. But what does that actually look like day to day? And I think we also know that today's global development and humanitarian challenges, given how vast and demanding and complex they are also inherently local, and they're shaped by the unique histories, power dynamics, and other factors specific to each context. We've really been making a shift at USAID to redouble our commitment to both shifting funding and decision-making power to the people, organizations, and institutions that are driving change in their own countries and communities. Now, we in fact are just launching our most recent localization progress report. It came out just this past week, and the webinar to launch it just in fact wrapped up. So if you have a moment later, please take a look. There's a lot of detailed information about all the work we've been doing as an agency around that. It's usaid.gov/localization. But I think it's important to also note that this is not a new effort for the development community. As an international community, we've made similar commitments in the past. But there's a distinction here that I want to make sure and acknowledge today, which is that the imperative of locally led development has gained new resonance over the last few years because we recognize that not only is local ownership of goals and processes critical for effective and sustained progress, it is a more equitable approach that recognizes and celebrates the knowledge and perspectives of those leading change in their own countries and communities. So in short, it means we have to do aid differently. So that's why funders around the world are redoubling their commitments and taking steps to move them forward. I'll share just a few highlights of what that looks like in the international space. Over the last almost 2 years now, we're going on about 2 years, we've had 21 bilateral funders and 26 philanthropic foundations have endorsed the donor statement on supporting locally led development. And that's focusing and that's committed to shifting and sharing power, working to channel high quality funding as directly as possible, and to publicly advocate for locally led development. And so you have a lot of organizations out there that are saying we're going to put more time, energy, and resources into these particular things. And that's why these statements are important. They really help ground the work that we're doing with it, not just within ourselves, but within other communities. And this actually includes the recent addition of 14 European foundations who signed the statement just this past month. And we've seen from our side a strong and growing interest among the European philanthropic sector to advance the goals set out in the statement. So something that I wanted to talk a little bit about today are some of the challenges that we all have are shared. We face maybe perhaps different constraints and flexibilities, which underscores the importance of a shared commitment to using our resources, leverage, networks, and power to move toward the same goals of advancing locally led development. We each bring different things to the table, and when we work together on these things, we're much stronger. So the inclusion and collaboration with the philanthropic community is really key here, because as political bodies, bilateral institutions sometimes experience shifts in priorities. So philanthropy's commitment to advancing locally led development lends critical continuity to these efforts. And in fact, cultivating the relationship with foundations has been a key priority of the bureau I work in at USAID and of the work that I've been doing. And it's an important part of our push to drive progress beyond the limits of programs and our own funding. I'll share just a few examples of this. We coordinate regularly with the US-based Council on Foundations. We've developed a relationship with Philae in Europe. And we've also formalized some relationships with individual foundations over the past couple of years. Just a few months ago in February, our administrator, Samantha Power, and the CEO of the Hilton Foundation signed an MOU to further advance and expand our work around locally led development. And we did it around some shared priority sectors. There's a wide range of them. They include, but not limited to, early childhood development, youth, humanitarian assistance, engaging with faith-based organizations. And we're also looking at exploring strengthening the evidence base around locally led development, which is critical. In March, we had signed an MOU with the Skull Foundation, and our two organizations have begun working together in Brazil to expand the abilities of local actors to execute projects around climate action, biodiversity conservation in the Brazilian Amazon. And we also have another agreement with Hewlett Foundation and the Center for Global Development that jointly supports locally led evaluation and evidence generation approaches so that we make sure there's a local lens and angle when we're evaluating the work of our programs. So those are just a few examples of some formal relationships that we have with philanthropy that we're using to deepen our work and strengthen our work around localization. So I wanted to just touch briefly on some ways that governments and foundations can partner together, just some kind of practical things that we've been thinking about over the last year. So one of the things that we found that it's important to find complementarities and comparative advantages. We all have different constraints, and in some cases, philanthropy has fewer constraints than bilateral funders. So that opens the door to different opportunities to, maybe focusing in areas that we're not able to, where we're perhaps limited. So really, where are comparative advantages and where are the gaps that we can respectively fill? Secondly, and this came up earlier from my fellow panelists, we can share our networks. It's really important to be as transparent as we can, to not kind of hang on to information in a way that doesn't allow other other groups and other funders to perhaps advance and also be successful. So doing more to share information on local organizations that we've either previously supported or are currently supporting. And this also helps local organizations kind of build their Rolodex, if you will, and make connections with other funders and donors that perhaps they haven't had connections with in the past. And then kind of what I mentioned earlier, there are formal ways of doing things through memorandum of understanding, or in some cases, co-investments. We have a project in Kenya right now called Yetu, and it's funded by USAID and the Aga Khan Foundation. And that's just one example. Yetu supports the formation of community-owned and driven local development organizations. And there's some capacity strengthening around that to work around mobilizing additional resources, including from foundations. So again, just one example. And then the last bit, and I touched on this a little bit a couple minutes ago, I think we can all work together to build and share the evidence base for the work that we're doing to kind of deepen and strengthen locally led development. And also just to share our stories to advance learning and support our advocacy efforts. We know how important it is to work together and share knowledge with funders of all types, but we recognize it can be difficult to navigate USAID's bureaucracy and maximize opportunities for collaboration. So over the past year, we have set up a new entry point within USAID's Office of Development Cooperation for philanthropic funders who are interested in working, collaborating, or frankly, just talking to USAID. We would love to connect with you all on this, have more conversations, whether it's on locally led development, democracy, climate action, or any other number of issues of mutual interest. So my colleague just dropped the URL in the chat. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shireen, for that. We have a lot of questions for all four of you pouring in, and I'm going to begin and open the floor up to all of you with a question that actually we received earlier, and I will put it into the chat now so everybody can see. So somebody asked us earlier that there is an elephant in the room, which is, how can funders really let go of their power and trust organizations to do what is best based on their own wisdom and experience? How can funders give away money based on trust and not use accountability, reporting, oversight, and other norms as cloaks for wanting to retain power and control? Who wants to go for that one? I'm gonna hand that over to Yara first, and then the rest of you can follow.
I think again, Shafiq, like it's really, I think there has to be a balance between creating that trust and a sense of agency and ability to support them with guidance and resources, but also trust that they will be able to return that in terms of reporting and documentation and accountability as well. And this is what we did with Wildeganzen. There was some guidelines in the sense that we had a time frame about the longevity of the project, the documentation process, the reporting, and that was given to the community to actually set up their own frameworks of documentation and reporting. But also there was that benchmark as sort of a guideline to tackle. And I think this is really important because that allows also for an understanding and for also a mutual understanding and for the outcome to be delivered in the most efficient and effective way. At the end of the day, it has to be a mutual, there has to be a mutual understanding, there has to be a mutual trust, but also we need to be able to have some shared indicators and some shared measures and goals and processes that we can also implement from our side to prove that this can work and to prove that we will support this and we will prove that, you know, this can be done in a way that's transparent. And there's actually lots of ways that this sort of model can also be strengthened through, for example, like we did with Wildeganzen, regular check-ins and feedback groups, but also, for example, site visits or, you know, really physical sort of check-ins to ensure that this is going in the right direction. And this can also in turn show the funders that this is, it's sort of an accountability, I would say, mechanism as well.
Raham, earlier you kind of mentioned that accountability is more powerful when it's community-led, but there is an argument to say, do we need any form of accountability if we're talking about shifting of power? What do you think?
Well, that's a tough one, Shafi. But I think I'm gonna let Noor complete what I'm saying. But let me start with it's a process, huh? And you can't change things when they are being set in a specific way immediately. I think deep comprehension of that concept also has to be realized by all parties. But I think the key for what we have done with our pilot, of which is the one that Yara is talking about, is co-creation from the beginning towards the end. I think as a funder for this specific program, we've seen it all, and we have also given in that there will be risks, and we are willing to take them. We are willing to learn from the community, and that we are there when they need, and only to provide the support if required. And that was the whole core of the design of this program. That is the check-ins, the support when required, the skill sharing amongst also the other partners that were in the same program. It was a complete build-up on co-creation. And I think that also at some point, reflecting back on the challenges and the internal buy-ins and the systematic changes that needs to happen, it was easier when you have seen it as a funder, that you have been there in the process. You've seen how the community consultations were happening, how the advisory committees at the community level were also selecting and developing their own scorecards to what they thought it was what matters to them the most. And that's exactly what, to me at least, that's where the accountability lies. It's because then local actors are holding themselves accountable towards their communities. And in return, also the communities are holding them accountable. And as a funder, I think that's all you want to see. You want to make sure that it's actually happening in the best way possible.
Nord, what do you think?
I mean, I fully agree with Riham and Yara, maybe because it's coming of an experience that we lived together like 3 years now, and then it's continuing for another couple of years. But I think it's the basic of letting this elephant believe that he should trust is the mission. If we're agreeing on the very big objective, then we can make things smooth to go on. So, and as long as there is this transparency, this collaboration, all what Riham and Yara mentioned, it's basically building this relation that if we agree on the overall objective, then everything else can be managed and done. Being flexible, giving the power to the community does not mean being not reporting, not being accountable, not overseeing. It's also our role to oversee what others are doing. And I think the accountability does not mean to control. It's accountability to make sure that the overall objective is happening, is coming up towards the end of the project. So it's like steps that we're moving. And I just add to what Riham said, it needs flexibility because we learn a lot. Every day we learn from what's coming from the community itself, from what's coming from the down, up, top, bottom. It's up, down, up. It's two ways. It's not one way, because every day we learn something new. There's a new challenge. There's a new risk, and we need to adapt and find a new way and an alternative way. So if we want to be that fixed and not flexible, that means we will not change. We will not move towards the impact and towards the objective that we have agreed upon in the early beginning when we start to plan together. So if the donor, if all the partners believe in the mission, believes in the objective of the project, then we all need to work and walk toward this objective. So we need to be flexible. So we need to support each other. We need to be accountable, because otherwise we will not achieve, and we will not make sure that we're walking the right track. Other ways we will be walking in different tracks and we will lose our target. So it's all about collaboration. There should be accountability. We need to be reporting. We need to oversee what's going on to make sure that the objective is coming up and the impact is really happening. But it needs to be the community need that we're working on. So it's like, where's the light that you're walking to and what's the way you're taking to that? Sometimes the road is closed and you have to take an alternative road. And that's normal, but we need this flexibility to change the road rather than walking in a step. If the road is blocked, then we don't continue. No, we need to continue and we have to continue, not for us, but for the community. This is the way we can build our long objective, but also we can know that what we believe is coming up.
We have a question from Caroline Thomas, and she says, I fully believe trust-based philanthropy is the right and only approach for donors to adopt. But despite years of pushing this message, I still see many funders wanting to remain in control. What techniques do the panel think are effective in building this trust we all want to see? Noor, I'll throw it back over to you and then I'll hand it over to others.
It's always very hard to work with a community because there's always changes, there's always challenges, there's always a risk. In the Palestinian context, because I know also from the Global Giving for Change program, there is always risk, there's always challenges everywhere. And we can see this in our learnings and the family gathering meetings. But it's about how we want to continue. Do we want to continue? If we believe in our mission, we will continue. But it needs to be an internal passion. It needs to be that we all working together, collectively, aiming to achieve what we want to do.
Yeah. Yara, any thoughts?
In terms of building trust, I think
techniques.
I think open communication, having frequent check-ins, asking questions, all of that really sort of builds up and initiates the process of creating trust. And like Riham was saying, it takes time. So with our collaboration and partnership with Build the Garden, it was a project of 6 months. And throughout that period, there were, as I said, regular check-ins, and it took a lot of time and effort. And for us also, it was a new experience. So we had to learn and we had to adapt and tweak and adjust as we go. So I think just being honest and being flexible and being open and communicating on a regular basis are some of the techniques that I would say are very much essential and important. And having the flexibility to the patience as well to wait and see and give feedback if there's something that is not working out for the funders, or there's any sort of risk management or issues, to mention it, and the other party will also listen. And I think listening is also one of the techniques, and having that active engagement and being willing to take feedback and also learn and hear from the other side to be able to build that trust and create that balance that will ensure the success of the partnership.
We have a question that asks, have you come across local communities who are used to, quote, more standard ways of working with funders and also find the transition to trust-based difficult? And if so, how did you support them through that? Reham?
Yeah, that's a very good one to reflect on. And I'll probably just reflect from the recent experience in the participatory grant making program. It was one of our key findings after we have concluded the pilot, and we found that some of the partners are local actors, because of the long experience and history with working with institutional donors, were trying to shadow that specific also kind of a model when working with smaller grassroots organizations or initiatives. So, for example, proposal writing, or submit a budget that contains 1, 2, 3 categories, or how are you going to receive cash, in which manner, how are you documenting payments. And I think what we have done was just to re-echo the message that participatory manners, participatory approaches is what is the core of this. And it took them some time to accept that it is okay to make mistakes and relearn specific procedures on how, for example, to handle cash when it's an unregistered, for example, partner, and that's not the only way to actually hold someone accountable. It varies. It's open communication, it's transparency, it's accepting risks, it's taking that leap of faith and believing that the others also want to do it the best way possible also for them. And I think on top of all of that, it's an aligned vision to what we want, what they want, what the community wants. And if you could tap on that, then you've got, I think, the proper combination.
Shireen, would you like to add anything to that?
It's been really helpful to listen to colleagues talk about from their perspectives how this works and what's needed in order to make it happen. I think we spend a lot of time through our missions making sure that local organizations know what's available at USAID, know how to access the funding opportunities. There are opportunities for them we have a new platform and website that's set up that hopefully one of my colleagues can add to the chat called Work with USAID. Where that's available in 3 languages, where you have access to funding opportunities and other resources. So just making ourselves as available as possible. I think the other thing that's important to note is to make sure that local organizations are aware of how this is a priority for us and making sure that there are platforms available for them to receive the support that they need. The other thing I would mention is we have a phenomenal cadre of local staff that work within our missions that serve as the continuity that, as foreign service officers cycle in and out, are really there building the relationships and the connections with organizations that can help kind of take them through the journey of what it looks like to kind of perhaps shift the aperture or widen the aperture from the local or from the more traditional model to a different type of model. The other thing I would note here as well is part of this has to do with the engagement and work that we do with our implementing partners that in some cases would be serving more as in an intermediary role than just as the direct interlocutor between us and them as the recipient of the funds. So kind of we all have new and evolving roles, and just making sure people are aware of what those are and what they can be. We just really try to make sure that there's opportunities there. The other thing I would note is that one of the things to also just be aware of and to respect, and this is again I think why it's important that philanthropy has a role in this as well, is that there are some cases where there are organizations that don't necessarily want to be in a direct funding relationship with USAID. And we have to acknowledge that and respect it and make sure that they have what they need and the resources are available to make sure they're getting what they need out of the relationship with USAID as a funder, but it may not be that direct funding relationship. It could be that they would prefer to continue as a subawardee, or just not engage with USAID in any sort of funding relationship. So that's another piece of it. It is just knowing what your limits are and making sure you are respectful of that as well.
One final question before we wrap up is from Hugh Davidson, and he asks, what would you like funders to contribute apart from money, for example, relevant skills? Noor, I'm going to hand this over to you, particularly given the circumstances right now in Gaza, which you're not in, but you're near. What do you think?
I agree. I'm not in Gaza. I used to be there in June, and I know how beautiful it is actually. And my colleagues are there. Okay, Dalia, I'm personally in Ramallah, but my colleagues are there, and they're living in very hard displacement. It's very challenging. But to tell you, giving is not always about money. Sometimes what you need is really being there. For example, within our Giving for Change program, okay, we got a financial support. That's fully true, but there is institutional support, skill learning, exchange of knowledge, exchange of information. That's really very helpful. It's about building the capacity of us as an organization, but also with all the grassroots that we're working with the CPOs, with the CSOs, and the initiatives, and the individuals, the youth, the women, with all their different backgrounds. Working with all these people is not about money. It's about building their capacity so they can continue the road without us. So when we do the mobilization of resources, capacity development for them, we know they can continue and outreach to others and get their fund and continue their initiatives and have a real impact that is rolling and rolling and rolling. So the impact maybe does not happen to be within the time, but it happens on the long term. There is a lot of different support we can get. Even a discussion with the partners is a support. People now living in an isolation that it's a genocide, yes, but even having a 30 minutes talk with Riham, with Yara, with all the partners and feeling their solidarity is an enough support for us to continue and to believe that we are right, we need to continue. This very small push, maybe it's a WhatsApp message that you get from your partner or from individual, or an email saying, how can we contribute? This is even much more than having a lot of money and not being really given for nothing, really given from the heart of the friends and the partners. So it's always there. We have received from other partners saying that we can do mental support for your team so they can keep their self up. So this is also a way of giving. Having a retreat for the people of the community supported and with the support of our friends is really good. Having some friends here who used to be in the diaspora and came back and just moved by the office of Dalia saying, we want to make sure you're good, is really good. Having this volunteerism, what we call in Arabic is aune. Aune is to support despite the challenges. So it is about giving, not only financial, but there's a lot of way we can give.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned mental health as well. You know, particularly given the conflicts right now, and not just the current ones, but you know, as Yara has worked with the Syrians displaced over a decade ago and still fighting the effects of that. Yara, would you like to add anything to what Noor has said?
Yes, I agree with Noor, very much so. I mean, there are other forms of giving, like capacity building, like exchange of information, sharing resources and tools and frameworks and guidelines. All of that is really, really helpful for us as a grassroots initiative, and also learning more about all of these processes in terms of reporting, um, in terms of these new structures and what's available is also really important. And just reaching out and supporting, sometimes even sharing a link or a crowdfunding campaign, or just, you know, checking in and getting feedback and giving feedback as well is really helpful for us and in general, I think.
Amazing. I wish we could have an extra 2-3 hours, but I don't think anybody in this call would want that. It's been so fantastic to hear from all of you. That's all we have time for. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming, and all our panelists for their amazing insights in this new direction for philanthropy. And also so great to see 4 women from Middle Eastern backgrounds speaking on this issue. It's rare we get such an opportunity. I hope it's normal and normalized in future. So I'm so happy that you are all here. Alliance will be hosting an event next month on our new issue, Philanthropy and the Common Good. Make sure all of you in the audience are on the Get Your Invite to this, and please make sure you're subscribed to the Alliance newsletter. There's a link in the chat. Thank you so much to Noor, to Yara, to Raham, and to Shireen, and hopefully see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.